You're listening to Heritage Radio Network.
HRN is food radio supported by you. Learn more at heritageradionetwork.org.
Hi, I'm Peter Reinhardt. Welcome to Pizza Quest. I'm coming to you once again from the Atlantic City Northeast Pizza and Pasta and Artisan Baking Expo. It's October, early October. We're going to be here for a couple of days talking to a lot of great people. And one of those great people is sitting with me right now. I will call him, because I can now, the legendary Philip Korshak, because of some recent events, which we're going to talk about today.
Yeah.
Philip's been on before. Philip's been a regular on Pizza Quest. We've had him on interviews. We've had him on live interviews, Zoom interviews. But now we're face-to-face here at this event. And the only reason you're actually here today is because you do not have to be at your bagel shop, Korshak's Bagels, in the Italian market of South Philadelphia.
Yeah.
Because of why, Phil?
Well, hi, Peter. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Because the bagel shop closed.
The bagel shop closed.
Yeah. We were open for a little under 2.5 years. We received unbelievable accolades.
I know.
And
national press.
Yeah, I mean, national press.
And never a shortage of lines of people lining up to get the bagels.
No, there were consistent lines, and we consistently sold out of the 1,000 or so bagels that we could make a day.
And yet you had to close.
And yet we had to close. The long and the short of it is that one of the things that you'll hear around an expo like this is that if you want to be an owner, if you want to be a producer, if you want to run a shop, then be prepared to work 12, 14 hours a day.
Yeah.
And I was sort of prepared to do that for a year. And
because you're an industry veteran, you've been in the pizza side, you've been in the food world for forever.
I have been doing this longer than I haven't.
Yeah.
As a being on this earth.
Yeah.
The reality of it, though, was that after 2.5 years of working really hours that aren't fit for being in the universe with any kind of balance.
Yeah, right.
And one of my core values is work-life balance, which I worked very hard to achieve for the employees. I really was neglecting for myself. And when I looked at the economics of it, to hire the person who would be the other me.
Yes.
Or that other person could be the other me.
Who could share the load and take some of the pressure off, yeah.
It wasn't economically viable within the context of how many bagels you can move and what it takes to pay people.
Because you had a sort of a cap on how many you could make under your system.
That's correct.
Hand forming every bagel. You weren't using a bagel shaper.
I'm not using a bagel shaper. I'm not using a cutter. I'm using a 2-day ferment with a 24-hour biga in there. Yeah, I'm only boiling 18 bagels at a time, getting them into an oven in 5-minute loads for 5.5 hours, taking
in a very small shop in South Philly, in a market that's a fabulous market, but it's a tough place to work though, because you're in confined spaces with limitations.
It's a wonderful, wonderful neighborhood full of lots of very small independent makers.
Yes.
All of whom support one another. The point of making more bagels than we currently could, we would still top out at a level where the number of human beings to create it and for them to have work-life balance, paid time off, and something approaching a living wage, not really viable.
At least it's viable for them, but not for you.
And still arguable about where the line is for how viable it was for them.
But at least they were getting a wage. You're working in a city, Philadelphia, essentially notoriously a union city.
Yeah.
So you're paying everybody union scale. They're getting to work on the union rules, not on
Right.
not on the artisan rules, which is you do whatever it takes to get the job done.
Yeah, so the artisan rule that I like, that I really engage in, and why I think dough has been salvation for me,
Ah,
is that it is about how can you be an accomplice to the process? How can you help? And a lot of that's staying out of the way,
uh-huh.
and a lot of that is getting your ego out of the way and understanding that what it's going to be and what it will take is going to be variable every time.
Yeah.
And so the question of how you can be really present is what the dough is asking you to do. What a gift.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not really in line with lockstep
Yeah.
reality.
Yeah. And sort of a predictable routine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I enjoy that. And I will note that in working with the union, we were able to get to ideals and practicalities that beforehand hadn't been reached and were not of my divination. A 60-hour, up to 60 hours of paid time off for a full-time worker, earning it at 1.5 hours for every 40, was not my idea. It was brought and I agreed to it. And I'm really grateful for that. And I think that 60 hours of paid time off for a human being working full-time is reasonable.
Yeah, if you from the standpoint of what the positives of what a union can bring it's there to protect the sustainability of the workers themselves, their
God love
safety,
'em.
their longevity, and everything else by
Absolutely.
putting in certain barriers to employers to keep from overworking them and burning them out.
Absolutely.
Even if it means that the owner himself has to work and burn out.
Well, exactly, and that onus is on me. I should have, in the very beginning, had another one of me who was as dedicated and as in the same mindset to be able to share it. My understanding of what would be possible with the workforce and a newer understanding of the landscape given COVID altered what some of my prior perceptions of what work were to the realities of what they are.
Well, let's backstep a little bit. The original vision of Korshak Bagels was based on, your philosophy of life. Everyone who knows you or has followed you on Instagram knows that you're a poet as much as you are a baker, and you think deeply about things.
I legendarily have no filter.
And you're also well read. You've got wide ranges of sort of life reference material. You have, I would say, a personal philosophy, and there was a vision behind Korshak. Can you talk a little bit about what that vision was?
Yeah, I'm very, very fortunate that I think all the things that you're saying I agree with. The philosophy was that if you are running a neighborhood shop, the human beings working that should be able to live inside of that neighborhood. And so the question would be whether bakery work is pretend work that people are doing sort of to get through or to do as a hustle. Or whether in fact it's respected enough inside of the community to be a part of it. And to that point, the people working in there should understand that the difference between a person who is at the register taking the money or greeting the person in or making the bagel or boiling the bagel or baking the bagel or doing the dishes, that there is no difference between any of us. We are all bagel mongers.
Because you're all working towards the same end together.
Right. We are
it's
all,
like a team.
We are, exactly. But a team weirdly without any competition. So not only do I want to destroy, eliminate the idea of a difference between front and back of house. And I feel strongly about that one. I also want to divide or get rid of the delineation between the customer and the shop. So any embrace of us versus them has a feedback loop that is unhealthy. So it is true, the customer, are providing the money for the thing. the money they give for the thing provides for us a way to get through the day that is okay. And we all go in the circle around
And in
it.
exchange, the customer gets back
Right.
a beautiful product.
Exactly.
It's a loop.
It is a beautiful loop, like a almost not distrustful of Western philosophy, perfect circle, right?
Uh-huh.
Where we miss the mark, or have been missing the mark, is believing that the money is the emphasis and that the transaction is only transactional.
Uh-huh.
That I disagreed with. And I thought that if a person were the same person who made the dough and also maybe baked the bagel, that person would be able to flow through the day inside the construct that was not limited to a position.
So let me unpack that a little
Sure.
bit. So like for instance, you're saying the person who's washing the dishes, there's no hierarchy of importance in this team.
That's right.
If you're washing the dishes, you're just as important as the guy who's mixing the dough or running the ovens or the cash registers. And in a sense, you're just as important as me, the owner of the company. We're one unit, one team.
Right.
It's very maybe could even be referred to as communistic or socialist or communal. Let's say.
So
Take it out of political sense.
So I think that
And it's a social organism.
it is a social organism, and where it becomes really skewed and hard to sort of pin down. So I'm talking about sort of a amorphous hive.
Yeah,
right?
hive. Yeah, that's a good image. Yeah.
And I, with complete artistic control that I am unwilling to bend on.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I'm willing to talk about it. I'm willing to be enlightened, but I'm not willing to give up
Yeah, that vision.
how the vision really works. And
which
to that
would be
point,
great if it could be sustained.
yeah, and I mean, like, which makes me the queen, which
Yeah.
I am fine.
Yeah,
like,
right.
what
You're
an
the queen
honor.
bee, yeah, yeah.
What an honor if that's true. But in the same sort of way of, okay, what I want to do is I want to make this thing because I think it's important. The thing that I'm making that I think is important is the bagel. The bagel I think is important because when people eat, they stop dying and they rebuild their cell structure and continue living. I think when we engage in commerce, we're doing the same thing. And I think how we engage inside of business is the same thing. And I think that once you look at the thing that you're doing, which again is intended to heal people, and start making decisions that are contrary to that in the interest of the other parts surviving,
Yeah.
I don't believe that the end result is true. I don't believe that when you begin sacrificing the idea and the reality of what you are feeding people for a speed or efficiency that will get you an economic gain,
Yeah.
that in the long run that pays off for us as a society.
So in a sense, in the context of the bagel shop, if you start to compromise on the integrity of your methodology itself, that the hand shaping, the dedication to the craft
Yep.
itself, that the craft, we'll say, is the most valuable part of this equation.
Yep.
That if you have to compromise on that, then you can't win by trading it off for more economic value, for making more money.
I don't believe so.
But if you could make enough money to sustain the hive and stay true to the craft, then it could work for a longer period.
Sure.
But in order for that to happen, you need to be able to make a lot more money because you need at least another fill in the place to take so that you don't burn out.
Right. That's
And that's
exactly
where the whole hive breaks down.
That's exactly right. The line that keeps bopping through around my head is like any Gemini, I thought I could do it on my own.
Uh-huh.
Right.
There you go. Wow. Yeah.
And wrong, right? I am very, very, very lucky to have worked with people who are not me, right?
Uh-huh.
Because that is where I get to perspectives that I wouldn't get to
Not everybody
otherwise.
sees things the way you see
Yeah,
them.
which is
That's an
beautiful.
important thing.
What that also does is reassures somebody of what their tone and their sound is. So I always fall back on this, but it is so much like being, I think, a producer in a band in a room trying to get a sound
Yeah.
for a song.
Yeah.
And what you're not trying to do is figure out how to play one song the same way over and over and over again. You're trying to build a room where there's enough space for everybody to get to the sound.
Yeah.
That's the sound of none of them, but the sound of all of them.
Uh-huh.
All of which is intended theoretically to serve the song, which in our case is every do,
Yeah.
right? To get that to where it's going so it connects. And it's the practice of that, the habit of that, the discipline of that, the work of that I find to be interesting and worth putting money into. To a fault, maybe.
You put in a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into it for sure.
Very lucky.
But then again, as you said, in the end, is it a sustainable model?
Not so much. That's the stammering is because Scott Wiener
Scott Wiener just came by.
Sorry, I don't want to interrupt, but I just gotta.
I love you.
He's going to join us on another
I don't
episode.
want to interrupt. I see Phil Korshak sitting over here with Peter Reinhardt, and my brain explodes. And Liam, who I haven't seen in a year. And I'm sorry, my heart and my brain, they're not exploding, they're implumping.
And we're all
nice
quelling here. Well, Scott, we want to get you back for a whole
I'll be
session
back.
with you.
I'll talk to you later.
I gotta go and judge.
Thanks for
I'm so
stopping
glad
by.
to see you.
One of the beauties of being in a live venue like this is the cool, unexpected stuff can happen.
What a capital M Mensch.
Yeah,
What a nice man.
Yeah, and Scott is doing some really important work with Slice Out Hunger, which is the philanthropic side of his commerce. So, which is again for him, his system works because he can make it financially work, not burn out, do what he loves to do, and make it and part of what makes it fulfilling for him is he also has a give back mechanism.
Right, and I he is a super, super special, talented, wonderful, genuine human being. When they write the book about him, the story of the building of the community underneath him and around him and how organic that is, right? How his outreach for community built a community that also moved inside and out like a coral reef, right?
Wow. Yeah. Very beautiful.
That is like Scott.
Yeah.
Scott is this beautiful part of a growing reef that builds a bay of safety.
He found a way to achieve something along the lines of what you were trying to achieve, and he found a model that works for him.
That's
looks
right.
like it could be sustainable as long as his energy holds out.
Yeah.
He's got endless energy, but also there's the economics worked to sustain it. The Bagels as an economic model maybe was too limited in what it could do.
I definitely think so. I mean, the anyone in the business will tell you that where you start really making money with bagels is in wholesale.
Yeah.
And wholesale is about making lots and lots and lots and lots of them.
Ask the people who started Lender's Bagels.
Yeah, and that's true, and that's okay, and no disrespect to the people who do wholesale, and much respect to the people who go out of their way to get bagels that they love, but I am sort of really dedicated to keep reminding myself that the important thing is the interaction human to human.
Uh-huh.
And that every disconnect for a person who goes to the market that buys the thing where they don't think about or put together that, oh yeah, there's 75 other people that had to be around for that to happen.
Yeah.
And the more sort of numbly we go through life.
Yeah.
And, like I said, I think it's habit and discipline of how we go through our day.
Well, you were trying to achieve something that goes against the grain of our current society because people, like you say, most people don't think about all the connections that bring a piece of meat to your table or a loaf of bread or split pea soup or something.
It wasn't. Yeah, it was Anthony Bourdain who was the first one to sort of peel back and let people say out loud, oh, there are other people that make this happen.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Whereas for, like lots of years that was still true. but nobody was looking at it and nobody was talking about it.
And I think what what you're describing there, what Bourdain did was he showed the the deeper picture,
Right.
but also it it was a sorrowful journey for him. As much as it looked like he was having a lot of fun, clearly it was sorrowful because the pain that he endured by seeing the limitations of where people are at versus him as an artist and a writer, more than he was a cook even, but an artist, that sensitive soul. It was, again, he couldn't sustain the pain of that.
No, I think that, so Bourdain was a person who was born on third and, got a homer pretty quickly. I mean, he was a educated, wealthy kid who got to slum and sort of try out being a dishwasher.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, whether it was punk rock or drugs or the reality that kitchen work is holy work, he caught it and understood, and then got an article written that was really, really well written.
Yeah.
That got him the exposure
that
as a
became
writer.
Kitchen Confidential. Yeah.
Yeah,
And then all of a sudden he exploded on the scene.
But his every missive that he wrote was about his connection to and his detachment from this very primal world of cooking with integrity.
Yeah. And that's why people really, loved him and connected with him, not realizing, the cost to him of sustaining that, which brings me back to you, because you've just gone through, in a sense, the death of your business.
Oh, sure.
And now you are 1 week away from that and in the process of grieving.
Yeah, that's right.
So
That feels
talk about
right.
that a little bit.
With Bourdain, it's important to remember that he was such a huge Hunter Thompson fan.
Yeah.
So,
It's context here.
Yeah, I mean, like that, then some of the tropes follow through. What I've come to think about grief is that the Emily Dickinson line is, grief is the thing with feathers. And the thing that I like about that image is that every time you touch a feather, it moves differently. It's got its own sort of paw, but you can go against the grain with it. It can be ticklish or it cannot be ticklish. It defies gravity in the way that it floats and falls. And it's impossible to think of a single feather without thinking about a chicken, which is a weird, very scary dinosaur.
Yeah, it's true.
And almost all the things with feathers out there are weird, scary dinosaurs.
Interesting.
The human instinct that I've realized inside of myself is that I think that if I understand a tool for grief, that I will be able to use that tool for grief forever. And what I have found to be true, and I think this is explicitly beautiful, is that every singular grief requires a tool of its own invention. There is no grief that is like other grief. How we deal with it in the present will always be different than whatever we did beforehand. With the grief around the death of the shop, I was lucky enough in that there was a week's notice to the public that it was not going to be a shop. And the public turned out in droves of hundreds, day after day.
My brother
day.
was in the line with hundreds of people around the corner waiting to get the last bagels that were going to be made.
Around two corners. I walked between 11th and 10th so many times. It holds about 300 people. If you're in a line of 300 to 400 people for a bagel shop that makes roughly 1,000 bagels, none of us are really that bad at math.
Yeah, right.
Right, so none of us are really there for this bagel at the end result.
Right.
Everybody who was there really, really seemed to be there with everybody else who was simply sad.
And to say goodbye.
And to say goodbye. And to say thanks. I mean, that was a part I really didn't anticipate and didn't think about. a lot of people went out of their way to simply remark, this meant something to me. End of statement. Known, like that's the most massive compliment that anyone could ever receive.
Absolutely.
The part that I think is really great is that all of these human beings who were drawn to this weird bagel shop at a weird time were able to see that none of them were alone. That's the part where we as a society, back to a shop, back to a team, back to a crew, where we really, really hit a high note is with one another. That's how harmony is achieved.
So in a sense, you achieved the mission of the shop, even if it wasn't a long-term run. You've touched a community of people
You
in
bet.
a way that they haven't even thought it through yet. It'll start to unfold for them over time, and you're still unpacking it yourself. You're still reflecting on what it all meant. But in one sense, there was a success.
Without doubt, there is not a question in my mind about whether the thing that happened with that bagel shop was successful or not. It is beyond the scope of expectation of what success actually is.
Yeah.
And to have been witness to it, proxy to it, and still inside of the hurricane itself is, I think, a pretty good way to talk about it.
Yeah.
I mean, all right, let's go with that. I like it. A hurricane is a weather system.
Yeah.
I got to be an eye of a hurricane for a little while.
Yeah, you were the eye of the hurricane. Yeah.
That is a massively wonderful place to be.
Yeah,
And
because in one sense, the eye of the hurricane is the calmest part of the hurricane.
Yeah. And in this moment, after not a week out. So this time last week, the last bagel went out the door.
Yeah.
Okay.
And my brother got it.
Yeah. Right. And then send me a picture with your mother. Oh
yeah.
my God.
And he brought it to my mother. Yes.
Oh,
yes.
Yeah. It feels like the eye of the hurricane.
Yeah.
Like it
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
is a place of peace and calm.
Yeah.
And the other part that I sort of really celebrate and think is important is that what the bagel shop can do and what happened is really, really cool. What will happen next in the world
Yes.
is really the intriguing part.
That's right.
And there are a whole lot of people who worked at that bagel shop who will go out and do other things. And like this one cat, CJ, and his wife Daria, CJ&D,
Yeah.
Trenton Pies, tomato pies. Unbelievably good stuff. And I wasn't a part of why they started, but I hanging out with them and them hanging out with me in the bagel shop, that's part of why I am now part of their tone. And I could not be prouder.
It's funny, as you're describing that, I'm thinking of this image that comes to me is of Richard Burton singing to Juliet, not to Juliet, but to a young child at the end of Camelot, saying, there was a time,
right,
and never forget it, that the Camelot actually existed,
right,
and it will go down in Lord, but it's inside of you now.
Yeah, no, and that's right. Like and it is fitting that at an expo, which is all about, okay, what can happen next?
Yeah.
You get to talk about what happened last.
Yeah, well, and each of these people that were touched, have an opportunity to do something with that as well. But but what people really want to know is what's going to be next for you, and it's probably too soon to know.
It's totally too soon to know. Until I know what happens with the actual building, and how the equipment sorts out, and whether there's somebody in the world who's going to have an idea of how it can still be Korshak Bagels and go on, or whether the employees figure out a way to get their own company together and try to do it.
Yeah, so that's none of that's resolved yet for people who are wondering.
Yeah.
And by the time this airs on the air, will be a few more weeks down the road, so
There might be
something
an
will
idea.
have changed. But it's one scenario possibility is that that the employees could end up saying, I want to buy it back and keep it going,
Right.
or someone else can come in and buy it and keep it going, or it could just fade away completely.
Or it could just fade away completely. Or somebody else could take over the space and do something really
different.
cool.
Yeah,
which
yeah.
is more than likely. I mean, like, that for sure, on whatever level will happen. It's a magic corner in a magic neighborhood.
Yeah. But then as you process all the lessons that you take from this experience, it's more than 2.5 years for you, because you started it well over a year and a half before it ever even opened, and you ran into all sorts the usual problems with getting zoning through and permits and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So it was a long process for theoretically a short run, and again, analogous to a Broadway show that spends years in development.
Yeah.
And imagine after all that, if they close after the opening week, the pain and the grief that everyone goes through.
Yeah, that's about right.
But there's takeaways for you.
Oh, yeah.
Can you speak to any of the current takeaways? I know that more will emerge as you have time to reflect.
So I think the big one is still the one about trusting the dough. So really, really being as present as possible. How to be kind in the present. How do I pull... Thank you. Thank you.
As people are walking by, giving Philip love. People who know him are walking
I
by,
love you too.
giving him love signs.
Thank you. Spread Bakery. Good stuff.
There you go. Look at that.
There is no such thing as over communication.
Yeah.
That one, I think, is a really good lesson.
So was under communication an issue then?
I think so.
In
I think that what's important to understand is that over communication will, by necessity, become awkward. So for human beings to truly understand one another, they have to be in agreement with whatever it is they're really talking about. And we as human beings are really pretty well programmed to go, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
And to avoid conflict. I mean, not for any nefarious reason, just to avoid conflict. And so okay, do you get what I mean? Yeah, I get. I'll do it. Okay, It's fine.
Right.
And then the sort of follow-up around that, if it's not quite what you want, it's still going to be awkward to go, this really isn't quite what I want. What I want is this, knowing that the interaction will be of well, why are you busting my balls when it's really getting done anyway? Okay, well, let's now have a philosophical conversation about what things being done are.
Yeah.
And if you can press through that, then you will get to gold, right? You will get to the place of human beings understanding one another.
But I think this is one of the challenges that any, quote, intentional community runs into. Intentional communities by nature can't really work unless everyone, like in the Beehive, is programmed to be on the same page.
Yeah.
And people aren't like that. So you're going to pull together any kind of intentional community, and you're going to have lots of people who eventually, this isn't working for me.
Right.
And businesses are like that. And it's an intentional community of its own, and people can leave the business or not leave the business. But the business could go on if the economic model and the leadership, the queen bee, so to speak, can sustain life.
Yeah, and that's sort of the big piece. And that's also, it is so obvious to me now that I am embarrassed, but like I said, when I opened it up, the idea was about a business that could afford a work-life balance in a meaningful profession. The meaningful profession part, I got right. The work-life balance part, I really got wrong. And the longer I held on to it still being wrong, the worse it got. And I should have been sitting here last year at this exact time.
You were supposed to be here last year, and you couldn't be here because you were in the middle of trying to sort out all these challenges.
I was in the middle of sorting out a vent exhaust problem that dated back to the first company that installed the first exhaust.
Yeah.
So, a decision that haunted me from a year and a half beforehand, where I went, yeah, you guys know what you're doing. Go ahead. Put that's what you...
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
If that's the exhaust that ought to be there, go right ahead. Fast forward, wasn't the right exhaust.
Yeah.
As a result of that, the employees, rightfully, were unhappy about working in a very smoky kitchen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so how do I deal with it? And so on. Had I, in the moment of dealing with the person who was installing the HVAC, had the tenacity to go, look, I really don't understand how it's going to do it, so can you kind of really make it clear to me? Because my expectation is that there won't be smoke.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I didn't.
Well, those are the painful lessons that we learn the hard way.
Yeah, that I think are applicable to every moment of every day.
So since we're coming to the end of this show, I'm going to ask you if you have any sense or intuition that there is a model that exists out there. You've still got some mileage left on the tread.
Oh,
people see you on Instagram and think this he's an old guy. He must be like 80 years old. You got this long beard. You got but you're really a young guy. You're younger than a lot of people on the floor here.
That's true.
So you've got at least another act or two in you.
Oh,
you see. So, and I know it's too early to know what it is, but do you have a sense that there is a way to achieve this ideal vision that you have? Because it's a high ideal.
I do.
Idea.
For whatever reason, my tenacity and my stamina is consistent. So, what gets to happen next, I am really excited for finding out what that will be, knowing that none of it will come like a lightning strike.
Yeah.
That all of it will unfold like a good Russian novel, and like that, I'm down. That's swell.
Yeah.
I think the model that will work will, I think, have to be fully employee owned.
Ah, there you go. Well, that way you get more buy-in and accountability.
Yeah, I think that the question of everybody when they walk into the job about why they're there and whether they want to be there or not, whether they need to be there or not, is really only a question that every last individual can ask for themselves or answer, right? If you are in a work situation which is salary-based and a quid pro quo for work, I do think that it's really hard to engage in that without resentment being the end result. I have never seen an amount of money at the end of it that is so green.
Yeah.
Where I have not thought, and they're still getting over on me. Or worse still, as a bartender that I used to work with in New York, a guy from Minnesota, used to say, Phil, sometimes you got to drink yourself to $20 an hour. And he wasn't wrong, right? I mean, whether it was ethical or not, the reality is the employee would figure out a way to get the money that they felt they deserved. And wrong, not here to judge, but I think if it is all employee owned, then
that's a pretty biggie, for sure. And one takeaway that I got from as you were retelling this is that maybe when ideating a vision of a business is to have partners to go into it with you who are already on the same page as you, that they're not employees, you don't have to bring them on, but that they're already there, who already are willing to share the load.
Oh no, it is so big, I think that's why I didn't even mention it. None of us should do anything alone.
Yeah.
None of us really have to. We are so better served when we work in context with one another. Never try to do this alone.
Well, I think that's a perfect place to end this conversation, because I'd like that to stay with people.
Me too.
So Philip Korshak, thank you. Welcome back to the world.
Thanks, Peter.
To the world that you left for 2.5+ years.
Yeah, no doubt.
We can't wait to, hear more of your story as it unfolds, and whatever the next Act 2, Act 3, whatever it's going to be, where it all leads. Because, Chris, we love talking with you about these things because, to me, you're the poet laureate of the artisan movement, and we love having you here on Pizza Quest.
Thanks, Peter. It is a true pleasure to see you. You light me up with inspiration, and every time I get to sit and talk with you, I feel like we're on the Ken Kesey Further bus.
Yeah, we are.
Thanks for taking me further.
We have so many things in common, that being one of them. Yeah. Well,
Right, thanks,
well,
Peter.
wonderful to see you. Thank you. And thank all of you for listening to Pizza Quest, for joining us here. And we'll see you on the next episode. Bye-bye.
Pizza Quest is powered by Simplecast. Thanks for listening to Heritage Radio Network, food radio supported by you. Keep in touch at heritageradionetwork.org/subscribe.